and welcome to Palace Confidential, part of a week of special programmes following the death of Her Majesty the Queen. Joining me today is the Mail on Sunday assistant editor Kate Manzi, Daily Mail's royal editor Rebecca English and the paper's diary editor Richard Eden. Now, if you enjoy this show, remember to like and subscribe to the Daily Mail Royals YouTube channel for more unrivalled royal videos. So, let's start with yesterday's occasion where the Queen's body was taken in an extraordinary procession from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Hall. Kate, I'm going to start with you. You were there in the hall. Can you begin to describe the atmosphere?
Yeah, I felt incredibly privileged to be one of the few journalists, along with Rebecca, actually in the hall when it was happening. So as you all saw on television, that marvellous procession coming down from Buckingham Palace, we were all there in situ. So we saw, obviously, the Queen Consort, Princess of Wales, Countess of Wessex and Duchess of Sussex, and they were standing, when they arrived in the car, they were standing there just at the entrance underneath this magnificent kind of stained glass window that was put in to commemorate the Diamond Jubilee. And as the procession got closer, obviously we couldn't see it in the hall, but we could just hear the bells tolling and the drums just getting closer and closer, and inside the hall was a complete silence. There was a moment of kind of levity when Mike Tyndall cleared his throat and Zara kind of shot him a look. But it was very intimate, actually. You know, it looks like it's a huge hall, but there's this magnificent kind of arched roof, but it was very intimate. Just the silence was profound. And when the coffin came in, it was one of those real moments of history that, as a journalist, you think, my goodness, I'm incredibly privileged to have witnessed, right?
You were there too, as Kate said, Rebecca, and you were standing quite close to the royal family. What sort of observations did you have from that?
Well, as Kate said, it was a privilege, and it almost felt like you were kind of in a moment of private family grieving, because there were, I don't know, maybe 300-400 people there and a few peers and MPs, but the place was so big, they were like kind of specks in the distance, you could barely see them. So it effectively was just you and a few ceremonial staff and members of the royal family with Her Majesty the Queen's coffin. And I have to say, a lot of what we saw was actually off camera, because people weren't actually allowed to pick up their cameras and photograph until they saw the coffin. But we've probably had about 5 or 10 minutes of waiting and watching. And I mean, the body language was fascinating. I mean, Camilla, she's been very emotional throughout this whole thing, and she was, you know, straight ahead, looking ahead of her, really trying to control herself. You know, likewise with Kate. I mean, Sophie Wessex, my heart went out to her. She looked like she was in bits, didn't she? She really looked shattered.
Really upset, doesn't she?
Yeah. And as I wrote in the paper today, you know, as that noise that Kate described got closer, you kind of saw her peer through the entrance as if she really didn't want to believe that this was happening. You know, it was like, oh God, is this the beginning of the end? It's the moment we really have to say goodbye to her.
It's the dreadful thing about funerals, isn't it? It's that manifestation of, you know, you have to accept that it's happening.
And this was a point at which they kind of handed over from that private night that they'd had at Buckingham Palace, away from the cameras the night before, just as a family with the coffin, and basically handing the Queen back to the people.
Yeah.
And it just felt, it was incredibly emotional. And then, you know, Lady Louise, bless her, she's only young, was in tears. And
Beatrice usually dabbing their noses. And also one of the things that really moved me were the ladies in waiting, and I've done a piece about them in the paper today. Inspired, kind of weirdly, I found a letter I wrote to the Queen when I was...
I did see your tweet, yeah.
When I was 9. Saying I had a school project for our school centenary and had to go around and look at an interesting building, and I just wrote to the Queen saying, like any 9-year-old do, can I come and look around your house, please? Obviously not knowing that many years later, I would look around it quite a lot. And I got this amazing letter back, which I say I've still got with the envelope, from the lady in waiting, Mary Morrison, saying, thank you very much for your kind letter, because they respond to every letter personally. You know, the Queen commands me that, you know, you can't come and look at her house, unfortunately, but we'll suggest the places you can. And Mary Morrison was there yesterday. You know, you can put the maths together and work out how old I am from that, but it was well over 40 years ago.
How old she is.
And
Did you get a chance to speak to her later?
no, I mean, I would have liked her to say, look, I've still got it, I've still got it.
They were standing for a long time, because the whole thing was standing, wasn't
Yeah.
it? And you have these 7 ladies in waiting, some of whom are of a great age, actually, themselves.
Yeah, well into their 80s.
Yeah.
And she and people like Lady Susan Hussey have been with the Queen for 60 years.
Isn't it
There is,
amazing?
I mean, the ladies in waiting fascinate me. They're known as the head girls, and there is nothing that they don't know that goes on at that palace. You know, they are the Queen's eyes and ears.
And
into
what's their
everything.
reputation? Are people frightened of them?
Well, if someone said to me, like, when I said to them about the ladies in waiting, they went, oh, I love the ladies in waiting. Like, they fascinate and they terrify me in equal measure, you know.
Will the king have men in waiting?
No, but Camilla will probably at some
Yeah.
point have to have a lady in waiting because
Yeah.
they just practically need it, you know, for correspondence and picking up flowers. But I was really moved by seeing them there, these kind of ladies. And they, at one point, one of them needed a seat, but they stood there on their walking sticks. One of them was leaning on their umbrella, and they were just determined to stand there proud by the Queen that they served in life, as they're now going to do in death. And it was things like that were just, I think, incredibly, incredibly moving.
It is amazing. Now, through all of this, Meghan has kept a low profile. How did you think she fit into the proceedings yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, look, the body language was very interesting. I mean, you know, I didn't want to focus the piece I'd written on her today because I think there's just so much more to what we're seeing. But you couldn't help but notice it, especially from where Kate and I were. We were so close to them, you know, right above them. It was a very good vantage point for a journalistic point of view. And you could see Camilla, Kate and Sophie were kind of together, and the body language was very comfortable between them. But then there was Meghan, and you know, you could have almost fitted somebody else in that space. It spoke volume. You know, even if you didn't know what we all know that's happened over the last few years, you would have turned up and thought, that looks a bit odd, there's something slightly wrong here. But then, to be fair, Sophie, who is known as quite a peacemaker in the family, turned and talked to her, and it kind of brought Meghan into the fold. And you know, she carried herself out with enormous dignity, but you know, someone whispered to me while I was there, God, that body language speaks volumes, and it did, I have to say.
Speaking of Meghan and Harry, Richard, I can't believe here we are on the eve of another royal funeral, and it's Harry's birthday, 38 today.
Yes, I'd actually forgotten that until I saw it announced in the paper today.
Gosh, he must be having a miserable one.
Yeah, I'm sure if they were back in California, they'd be having a grand party with their show business friends. But I don't know if they'll celebrate with a quiet meal or something, I guess, between them. I mean, the other royals, you know, are not really around. They've taken a break before the funeral. Prince Charles has gone to rest at Highgrove. And I believe the Prince and Princess of Wales, William and Catherine, have gone to Norfolk.
So it's not like Harry will be seeing any of them?
No, I wouldn't have thought he'll be seeing them at all. Remember that it was their daughter Lilibet's first birthday when they were last here in June,
yes, yeah.
during the Platinum Jubilee. And that was interesting because they did have a party and they invited people. But it turned out that I don't think really any royals turned up. The Queen did see them, but separately, and she made a point of not agreeing to have a photograph Lilibet meets Lilibet, which I think there were some suspicions they might want this photo to use in the future and use as part of their commercial activity. So,
gosh,
you know, I'm sure they'll wish Harry a happy birthday when they next see him.
Kate, we touched the other day on the prospect of any possible reconciliation between Harry and his family, and today Richard Kay raises that subject again, suggesting that it would be very advantageous to Charles to bring him back in, to take some of the workload and to possibly capitalise on Harry's popularity. What's your view?
I think we all hope, don't we, that there'll be this big kind of reunion, particularly between the brothers. And we had a glimpse of it last Saturday. So we were told by Kensington Palace that we were to expect the new Prince and Princess of Wales to do a little walkabout, look at some of the flowers on Saturday afternoon in Windsor. And it's going to be about 4:30. It's later and later and later. And obviously when they did emerge about 5:15, we had not just Kate and William, but the Duke and Duchess of Sussex as well. And that looked like the beginning of something quite amazing, really, that they could all perhaps work together. Here was the Fab Four reunited. I would say from the body language we saw yesterday, that's probably further off than we had hoped. It did look slightly frosty. Having said that, it was a ceremonial, funereal procession, so it's not something that you'd see lots of laughs or smiles at. But like you say, the body language, it did look like there's still some way to go before those brothers can be perhaps what they once were.
And also, Richard, what Richard Kay was saying is that possibly some of the commercial deals already set in stone and like a runaway train will put the dampeners on any idea of a reconciliation.
I mean, I would love the idea of sort of just turning back time and going back to what Prince Charles had always wanted of this slimmed down royal family. But I just don't think it's going to happen because, I mean, remember why they moved to America. They wanted privacy, they wanted to get away from the British newspapers. Sure, they wanted to make money. And they will have to give up doing that. They'd have to give up their podcasts, they'd have to give up all the cashing in they've been doing. And I don't think there's a chance that they'd consider that. So I'm afraid I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, let's move on. This week we have been creating a series of galleries of some of our favourite images of the late Queen. Today we bring you Her Majesty on tour. Some historic images there. Now that the Queen is lying in state at Westminster, the attention turns to her funeral on Monday. Believe it or not, it's incredible, isn't it, to be talking this way? But Rebecca, you have just come off a call from Buckingham Palace. Is everything set in place? All plans smooth?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're so they're such a well-oiled machine, the palace, and these have been so rehearsed for many years. But, there have been tweaks along the way, and I'm sure there will be tweaks before Monday. But I think what is going to be so exceptional about Monday is you've got the pomp and the ceremony and the majesty, paying tribute in a fitting way to arguably the greatest monarch this country has ever known. But there is some really personal touches to it as well. And I know Kate will know this and Richard probably as well, but it's really worth emphasising, because I'm not sure always that our readers and viewers will know this, that after the big event at Westminster Abbey, the Queen is taken by the state hearse to St George's Chapel at Windsor, where there's a second, more intimate ceremony. Intimate being 700 people and still cameras, but compared to the 2,000 we're going to see at the Abbey, that's very different. And that's when you'll see, I think, more of the family tributes. You'll see the King laying a standard on his mother's coffin. I suspect that there'll be more tributes there. And then even after that, after the television cameras are turned off, there is a third ceremony. And the Queen is not actually going to be buried in the royal vault, which I think a lot of people would assume she would be. Attached to St George's Chapel, there's a King George VI Memorial Chapel, which was built. It's amazing. It's
and
tiny.
Margaret's there.
It's tiny, isn't it? So she's got her mother there, her father, who are buried there, and Princess Margaret's ashes.
And it's beautiful.
Yeah.
The marble is incredible.
Yeah, and it's really serene and calm, because it doesn't have the kind of the majesty and the history. It's family. And so what will happen afterwards is the royal family will gather there. Prince Philip's coffin will be brought out of the royal vault where it's been there since last April, and him and his wife will be buried with her father, her mother and her sister.
Oh my goodness.
I know, I actually feel shiver down my spine
Yeah.
saying it. And of course, King George VI was used to refer to his wife and his children as kind of, you know, we four, us four. And obviously it'll be them with her beloved Philip together again for all eternity. I mean, I just think that's beautiful.
Gosh,
really
it's so
beautiful.
it's so emotional. But Kate, it's also, you were on this call as well. It's an occasion that most of us will have never seen the like of.
No, I mean, we've got the blueprint, haven't we, from a long time ago. But yeah, this will be remarkable. And I agree with Rebecca. I think that second service in Windsor will be really special, because that's the point at which we'll see some staff, you know, former staff, current staff who will be invited, who wouldn't have been invited perhaps to the Westminster Abbey, the big service. But there, it'll be a kind of homecoming, you know, the place that she loved in Windsor. And you have the orb and the sceptre and the crown, and that at the last moment will be taken off the coffin and returned by the crown jeweller to the Tower of London. In the most symbolic of ways, that's going back to the state now. You know, the crown has passed to King Charles.
And the breaking of the staff as well.
Yes,
yeah, I mean,
yeah.
it's amazing.
There's some incredible tradition that, you know, most of us, living today will never have seen and certainly wouldn't even know about. But
Exactly.
so that's being revived, but in a kind of modern way. So we'll have, in the Abbey, we'll have the Queen's charities represented. So some of the charity patronages, and there'll be people from diverse faiths. It won't just all be, you know, Anglican Church. So it will be tradition, but bearing in mind, you know, the journey that we've been on the last 70 years as a nation.
It's history, it's pomp, it's ceremony, it's formality, it's all of those things. And Richard, we have world leaders arriving in minibuses.
So they should.
Sorry.
This is, to explain to viewers, this is the complications of getting everyone in to a very sort of confined area. They don't
I hope they're not going Addison Lee, that's all I can say.
They don't have the space for, you know, fleets of limousines to be bringing in these world leaders. So lots of them will have to arrive together. So they will be taking their seats on minibuses. You'll have, you know, a sort of 80-year-old head of state of one country, perhaps sort of Kim Jong-un, you know, next to...
Do we really think it's going to be Kim Jong-un? I did read yesterday that North Korea is invited. Who is it really?
I think...
Yeah, I mean, you have got the likes of the Emperor of Japan.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to... I don't think the world will have ever seen anything like this for a long, long time.
No, I'm not sure.
If ever.
The last time, I mean, there has been special
Maybe
dispensation.
world peace will be brokered on those minibuses when people are thrown together in force.
There could be.
Play nicely.
Yeah.
There's been special dispensation for the US President Joe Biden that he will be able to arrive in his protected vehicle.
In the Beast.
And that's already caused tensions, apparently, with other countries that want their leaders. But, yeah, I mean, in every country that will be represented, there's a story there, you know, about who's going, who's not going. There are so many stories to tell all around the world.
Are you going, Richard?
Well, it would be nice, but unfortunately I have to be here for the viewers of Palace Confidential.
Oh, well, that's hugely fortunate. But, Rebecca, looking beyond that, once the funeral is done, there'll be a huge transition to make as reality's back and everybody has to step into their new roles and adapt.
Yeah, I mean, and I think what we were talking about just then about the amount of world leaders that want to come to the UK, it shows you the Queen's very unique position on the world stage. She was probably the best diplomat this country will ever have. I mean, she was such a unifying factor, as you say, from every, you know, messages and condolences from President Putin in Russia. I mean, you know, she transcended everything. And so that is a huge loss to our country, and they are big shoes to fill for the King. And I think, I read a piece about him the other day, he knows he can't step into her shoes, he doesn't want to step into her shoes, but hopefully he can bring a sense of, you know, wisdom and accumulated experience. And, you know, it was a big change for his, you know, his son, you know, the new Prince of Wales, you know, who's still trying to protect his family by having to step up and take on other duties. I mean, yesterday he held his first official meeting as Duke of Cornwall, in charge of the Duchy of Cornwall, things he wouldn't have had to do before. So, so for everybody, you know, from the top to the very bottom.
Kate, is it true that there's talk of the new Prince and Princess of Wales being shipped to Australia to lead a bit of a pro-monarchy
I thought you might answer that,
onslaught.
Joe, because you'd be
Yeah.
interested in
Well,
your relatives might be interested in.
You know, the chat is rumbling about where this leaves Australia and its Republican debate.
Oh, well, look, I was on that, was it 2012, I think it was, when they went over with Prince George. I remember writing it about the time about George being the kind of Republican dragon slayer. He was so popular. He was so cute. It was just a little 6-month-old or something.
I mean, one is reminded of Princess Diana derailing the monarchy chat in 1983. So
and the Cambridges as
Republican
was, the
rather,
Waleses
yeah.
as are now. You know, they have huge cachet in Australia, and it would be a really good move actually for them to go over. William to give a few speeches about his father, the King, and prepare people there, because they have the magic touch, especially when it comes to Australia.
that's going to be interesting. But Richard, you know, just as they sort of like upped and moved their life to have a quieter life, doing the school runs with the children, stepping away, how's that going to pan out? Are they going to get busier?
I mean, it hasn't lasted literally no more than the first day of school, and everything has changed forever. But our Australian viewers will be able to tell me, but from what I read, you know, William and Catherine are more popular than Charles and Camilla, so the idea of sending them makes sense. And I don't think the new king will be able to just go on a sort of endless tour. He will have so much to do that it would make sense for them to go, and I'm sure they would help shore up the monarchy, and I think Charles will be using them a lot in that respect.
It's fascinating. Well, that is a story we'll certainly be covering more of in the coming weeks on Palace Confidential. And if you want to keep up on all of these topics, a reminder to like and subscribe to the Daily Mail Royals channel. We'll be back on tomorrow, and we hope to see you then. My thanks to Kate Manzi, Rebecca English, Richard Eden, and as always to you for watching. Bye-bye.